a bunch of things here on the left-hand side. There are the menu. This is the menu item from JIRA. One of the really cool things are the reports. So if I click here on reports, it's going to take me to the reports page of JIRA. And you can see here there are Agile reports like the burn down chart, sprint report, the velocity chart, cumulative flow diagram, and so forth. And one of the things I really like about JIRA is that it does automatically all of this for you. In a lot of the other tools, they don't actually have this functionality. You have to actually do it manually yourself, or you have to buy something extra to get it, or an add-on or something else. JIRA, that's part of their product. It's part of what you can see here directly in JIRA. And if we wanted to see, for example, this burn down chart, one of the most popular charts in Agile, you're going to see here, this is what our sprint looked like. And you can see here the convention of that graph here on the right, what it means. And if I did here, let's say our previous sprint, sprint 2, so you can change and you can see how we did on the previous sprint as well. The green represents time spent, remaining values. And again, this is things you can also kind of like untick. So if I wanted to take out the red one, you can actually remove it as well. You can configure this if you wanted to. So yeah, like I was saying before, you can actually change this graph and customize it if you click here on this drop-down menu. For example, if you wanted just to see the original time estimate. Okay, so this is the burn down chart. And the gray line is kind of like the theoretical way of the burn down going down. If you had actually gone as ideally as if everything had gone in the perfect world, that's how it would have looked. But the orange one or the red one here that you're seeing is showing you the real actual burn down graph, how it actually went. Okay. And as you can see, we started here and we did end with less amount of remaining work. In case you're wondering why sometimes the graph went up, it means we actually added user stories to that sprint, which is something you shouldn't be doing ideally, but in practice it does happen. Sometimes in practice you actually need to add user stories to your sprint. So again, practice varies sometimes versus theory. And so we added the user stories when we needed to in this sprint. And that's why at the end of the sprint, we actually had a lot of remaining work, also because we added too many. In this case, it basically just showcases that we had too many user stories in that sprint. So probably a lot more work that we could actually take on. Okay. I'm just going to go back, remaining time estimate. All right. And yep, this is just like an example of the burn down chart. And I'm just going to go back here to reports. I'm going to switch reports. And let's just go to the sprint report. Okay, so it's showing you real quickly here a bit of a summary. And if you scroll down, completed issues, issues not completed. So this is showing us sprint 2. I can actually change this to sprint 1 or 3. It's just showing us 3 sprints because this is the number of sprints that we've done so far in this project. If I went to sprint 3, it hasn't actually been marked complete yet, but it's pretty much completed because there's no time remaining on the sprint. So the completed issues or user stories or bugs are here, and below are the ones that we didn't complete. And it just shows you, like I said, this is just a sprint report, and this is what a sprint report looks like, and that's what you would be discussing with your team in your retrospective and when you're looking at how you guys did in that sprint. All right. And this is really cool. Like I said before, just keep in mind that in JIRA, they refer to a user story, a bug, a task, and an epic, pretty much anything that you're creating in the system as an issue. And the reason why, in case you're wondering why JIRA does that, is because originally when they created JIRA, it was actually a software for tracking and managing issues, bugs in software. But then over time, it became an agile software, an agile project management tool. But they've actually kept some of the terminology. So that's why they still use that, the name issue. But it's not really that what you're seeing here is actually an issue. That's why they have here the issue type. These green ones are user stories, and these bugs are actual bugs, are actually problems, or they would actually be, let's say, a real issue in this scenario. But that's just, like I said, not something for you to worry about. I just wanted to very quickly show you that you have a bunch of reports that you can, if I go here back to our sprint or our Kanban board, I could actually go back again to reports real quickly. And like we saw before, there's a bunch of reports here if I click here on all reports in JIRA, it's going to show you all the different reports. And in case you don't remember what each report means or what they stand for, etc., JIRA makes it super easy for you and puts like a little summary below the name of each report, which helps you remind yourself what it's about. And of course, like I said, they have a ton and a lot of information in help guides and the help center and knowledge base articles, and they also have a community. So you're not gonna you're not gonna not find information about something if you had a question about it. And anyway, I hope you found this useful. It's just a real world example of an Agile Kanban board in JIRA and real world examples of what reports look like in JIRA. We just covered two of the many reports. We covered the burn down chart and the sprint report. And we could also have a look real quickly at the velocity chart, just so you can see what the velocity chart looks like. Here it is. This is what the velocity chart looks like, committed and completed. And once we complete sprint three would appear here on the right. But just real quickly, because this is a project that is just starting up, it is a great example to show you something that typically happens with Agile teams when they're just starting to work together on their projects. It is very, very common to see Agile teams that are just starting up with their projects to overcommit and to plan to do way more than what they can actually do in a single sprint. And that's what happened to us in sprint one. As you can see here, the gray one represents the commitment, so what we planned to do, and the green one represents what we actually did, what we actually completed when we finished this 2-week sprint. As you can see, there's a massive gap, right? We thought we were going to do all of this, but we actually were able to only do this little bit here. That's very common when you're starting up in your Agile projects. And then sprint 2, we said, okay, let's get more realistic. So we planned for less work than what we planned in sprint 1, less. But we also had an efficiency as a team because we started to work better together. We started to understand better and get an inertia, learning curve, a lot of things that happen when you're working through sprints. This is very typical, again, very normal. And what you're going to see here is that we actually did way more than the we committed, which is great. That's awesome, right? But ideally, you want these two bars to be at the same height, at the same level. You want basically to complete what you plan to complete, all right? But if you did more, that's okay. If you did less, well, it's a lesson learned for you. It's something that you need to reflect on. And what you're going to see over time in this graph, in a velocity chart, is that it starts to go from small to less to more, and then it plateaus. Then it becomes it stabilizes, because then you become better at your estimating as you're going through your different sprints. Your team is going to start improving, and you're going to get better at planning and at executing at the same time, which means that you're going to reach a status and you're a level as a team in which these two bars are pretty much at the same level. And also you're going to start seeing that the velocity, which initially is low and it starts to become higher and higher, at some point it plateaus and it becomes kind of like a stable line, a straight horizontal stable line, which shows you that the team has reached a level of maturity. All right, guys, I hope that this bit here of JIRA is something that you can take advantage of. Like I said before, if you want to learn a lot more about JIRA, just search for my JIRA course, or just go to YouTube or read or whatever you want to do, or just enroll in JIRA. Just go to JIRA and create a free account and start playing with it. But this is just to give you, I guess, a bit of a taste for JIRA, and so you know what's included there. And I just showed you a little bit of JIRA. JIRA has a ton of things more than what I just showed you, but I probably show you some of the really key things. And like I said, I just wanted to give you a real world example of a real project that we're working on. And you saw right there an Agile Kanban board and a few of the reports that you could see. If I go here back to active sprints, this icon here with the board, it takes me to our Agile Kanban board, which we saw before. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this part of the course. This is a real world example of a real project, a research project that I'm working on right now. And I just showed you what it looks like in JIRA. And I'm sure you're going to get a lot of value out of this lecture in the course. And I'll see you in the next one. Cheers. Bye. Backlog or the backlog in JIRA. Okay, so as you can see on the left-hand side menu, I'm already on the Backlog tab. And if you recall, you can also collapse this left-hand side menu or sidebar by clicking here at the bottom, or you can again click there and expand the sidebar again. So if you have it collapsed, you'll just see the icons here. And if you expand it, you'll see the icons and the name. Okay, so just real quickly, like I said before, we are on the product backlog or backlog. You also see the name here at the top as well, backlog. All right, so what do we generally have in the product backlog? So in the product backlog, we have basically all the issues that we created in our JIRA project, right? And if you recall, issues don't necessarily mean problems, but that is actually just the JIRA convention or the JIRA name that it provides for the different things that we create in JIRA, right? So kind of like the name type for every time when we're creating a user story, an epic, a bug, a task. In JIRA, like we talked before, we call them issues, right? And you see that here on the menu on the top. Also, when you click on the create button, like I said before, you're gonna basically start creating an issue, right? And remember that here, just when you select at the top the project, it gives you the option to what issue type it is. So what category does this issue belong to? Is it a task? Is it a story, user story? Is it a bug, or is it an epic? Okay, and just remember that these fields are also configurable, so you could actually add more of these different types of issue types if you wanted to in the settings of JIRA. Okay, so I'm just gonna cancel this just because I just wanted to show you real quickly. But like I said before, in the backlog, we have pretty much every single issue we've created in JIRA. So you'll probably notice that at the top of the backlog, we have the current active sprint. In our case, this is sprint 4, and that's from the 3rd of March until the 13th. And it has 22 issues or 22 things that we're working on in this particular sprint. And you can see everything that is all the issues that are part of the sprint are here below the title of the sprint. And if I actually collapse this, I'll see here the backlog itself and all the issues that are part of the backlog. As you can see on this project, we have a pretty big backlog. We have 241 issues that we need to work on to complete the project or to complete the product. Keep in mind that the backlog is not a static thing. It's something that generally can be increased over time, or it could actually be even reduced in your backlog grooming sessions. When you're working with your Agile team or your Scrum team, you might actually decide to reduce the backlog or increasing depending on what you're trying to achieve, okay? But in this case, with the information we have at this date, we currently have 241 issues logged in JIRA in our backlog. And this is basically what we use when we're doing our sprint planning and planning what we're gonna be working on next, right? Our next sprint. We look at our backlog and then we take a subset of the user stories or tasks or epics that we have there, and we add them into our sprint backlog or the next sprint that we're going to be working on, right? So you see here that in the backlog tab, where this whole section of the course, we're talking about the backlog or the backlog tab right here. You can see here, there's a button at the top right-hand side corner that says create sprint. So if I actually clicked on this, it would allow me to drag and drop here different types of issues that are in the backlog to create the next sprint, okay? But I'm just gonna delete this because it was just something quickly that I wanted to show you. Delete it. Yep, confirm. Okay, so that's basically all you do when you're planning in JIRA your next sprint, the next, fortnight or the next, whatever you've designed the length of your sprint. Just remember that some Agile teams work with 1-week sprints, other teams work with 2-week sprints, others with 3, and others with 4. It doesn't really matter because JIRA gives you the flexibility to define the length of your sprint right here in the system, right here in JIRA, and you can put the range, whatever range your team is using to work on their Agile project. In our case, we're doing fortnightly sprints. That means every 2 weeks we're creating a new sprint and adding a bunch of issues from our backlog into the sprint. So like I said before, if you were going to create a new sprint, you just click on create sprint, and then you can rename this. Right now it's just put sprint 4, but I could actually easily change it to, this is actually sprint 5, and it's going to be from March, because this one finished on the 13th, so this could be March 14th, and so forth, and then, count 2 weeks after that. Okay, and then you basically create your next sprint. Let's say this is going to be 2 weeks. Let's say this is the 28th. I'm just, just giving you a quick example of how you would do this. Of course, I can also remove this number 2, and I can just add a parenthesis here. And then you could just start dragging and dropping. As you can see here, you can actually drag and drop from the backlog. You could actually drag and drop from the backlog issues into your next sprint, right? You could just easily drag and drop them and put them back, all right? That's all you would do when you were doing your next sprint planning, okay? So that's what I wanted to show you in this part of the course, just how to create a sprint. You just saw how you did it. I'm just gonna delete this because it was just a test. Delete sprint, confirm, okay? And I could also, like I said before, expand this sprint to see this is showing us the current active sprint, the sprint we're working on at the moment. And just a quick recap, remember that these little icons indicate the type of issue in JIRA. So in this case, the green one, this little green icon means this is a user story. The red one means it's a bug. And we don't have any epics here. But as you can see, this user story is part of the ONI epic. This pink color here, ONI MVP, represents an epic. And this other thing here, ONI version 1.00, 1.0.0, it's the version, right? Which is the release. And we'll talk in a little bit about releases in JIRA. But basically, you can actually tag your user stories with a particular release so that, when you're working on software projects, generally when you release a version, it's like version 1.1 or versions 2.21 or whatever it is. And this is how you could actually manage the release. You don't necessarily have to use numbers, of course. You've seen Google call them KitKat or, Google Oreo or whatever. So you don't necessarily have to use numbers for your releases. You could actually just give them a name like Google does when they're working on their projects, and they call them Oreo or whatever. And again, I know I'm talking about a specific, in this case, I'm talking about a project that relates to an e-research product, a research product. Research data management plans is a system that's called Stash that researchers use. But it doesn't necessarily mean, of course, that you can only use JIRA for IT projects or technology projects. You definitely can use JIRA for any other type of project. And let's say if this were a marketing campaign that you were working on, you could call this, depending on the different releases, you could call launch one a particular name and then assign user stories to that and tag user stories as part of that release. And we'll cover releases in another subsection or another part of the course, but I just wanted to show you quickly here what this tab is about. The backlog, like I said, is basically where you have everything that you're working on in your project. And you can see our whole backlog here. If I scroll down, you're going to see everything that we have in our backlog. And this just gives you a view of what you're planning to work on your project as a whole. And you can see here some quick filters. In our case, this is, of course, filters that we've created. And you could actually change this if you needed to. And if you search here, of course, it's going to give you the option to search again for, whatever it is that you're searching for. There's a little kind of like sidebar as well. You can see the versions and the epics. So if I click on versions, it's going to show us the different versions that we're working on at the moment. And you can see this, Stash version 3.2.0. And it gives you an indication, a visual indication of where you're at in terms of completion of this version. And if I actually hover my mouse over it and I just left it there, it says 21% of estimated work done. So we've completed 21%. And then you can see the remaining amount here on the right-hand side in gray. Same goes for this one. If I hover my mouse over it, it'll say 66% it's already completed. That's why you see this blue line is beyond the half of the line as a whole. So because it's more than 50%. So in this case, it's 66%, meaning there's a bit remaining, right? We're talking about 34% remaining in this scenario. And this is another version. I can, if you click on these three dots, you can edit the name if you wanted to of these versions. Or you could add more, of course. I'm going to hide this panel. And if I click here on epics, show the epics panel, it's going to show me all the epics that are part of this project. And if I scroll down, I can see all the epics that we've added to this project. And then the ones that don't have any color in the line means we haven't even started to work on them. And the ones that have blue means we're working through those issues that are part of those epics, right? In this case, they could be user stories or bugs, etc. Right? Remember that issues, like I said before, is just how JIRA calls pretty much anything that you create in JIRA. So when you create something in JIRA, in the system, JIRA calls it an issue, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's an issue. Like I've said before in the course, it just means a type of issue, a category of something that you're creating in JIRA. Like I kind of think of it a bit like a ticket. So you could actually convert that or categorize that as in terms of the issue type that we saw before. When you're creating the different issues, you can categorize it as a task, as a story, as a bug, or as an epic. And again, you can customize it, but generally you probably won't use anything beyond what is actually already there, because it's pretty standard, pretty common when you're working on projects. And this is, you just enter the information of your issue in JIRA, and then you create it. And every time you create a new one of these issues, it'll automatically go into your backlog, because remember that the backlog has everything that is part of the project. So all the issues that are part of it. And that's why you saw this big number here when we're looking at the backlog, 241 issues. And like I said, you can filter this. It gives you the option here to see all. It's showing us in this case, we're seeing the first 100 issues. If I click here, it'll show me the first 100 issues. If I click here, it will show us the first 500. And if I click here, all issues, it's going to show us all the issues that are part of the product, project, or service that you're working on. Okay. So that's pretty much it, guys. Like I said, also, you can, as always, click everything in JIRA. You can either hover your mouse over it and it'll give you more details, like you're seeing right now here when I'm hovering my mouse over these icons. You can click on remember that the ST605 is just like a unique ID that JIRA automatically gives every time you create a user story or an issue in JIRA. In this case, it's given this random number ST605. It's just a unique identifier. ST is just the summarized name, stands for stash, which is the name of the project in this case. So depending, every time you create a new project in JIRA, it'll automatically create kind of like a name convention for you, like we saw earlier in the course. And again, you can right click on this link or hyperlink and then open the link in the new tab. And it'll just show you here the details of that particular issue. In this case, the issue type says story. So this is a user story that we're working on. The priority is should. And here is the epic that it's part of. And here we can see more information like we talked before about who's working on it, the dates, time tracking, etc. Right? And then here are the subtasks that are part of this issue in JIRA or user story in this case, and so forth. If I went back to the board, I'm just going to close this tab now. Remember that you can also either right-click on it like I showed you, or you can just click on it simply, and it'll open it here on the right-hand side for you, a bit like in a bit of a summarized view. Okay, and then you see here, you have a bar. You can scroll up and down, of course. This is for the backlog over here, but there's also a little bar on the right-hand side as well here for just this little summary view that you have of that particular issue in JIRA. Again, this is not showing you anything different to what we saw here when we clicked right-clicked on it and then open it in a new tab. It's the same information, just that you can see it here in detail by right-clicking on it, or you can simply see it by not right-clicking, but just clicking on it on the issue, and it will show you this little summarized view of it on the right-hand side, right next to the backlog. So it really gives you a lot of flexibility on how you want to look at things. And that's one of those things that is typical of JIRA. And that's one of the reasons why people love JIRA so much as well. It's because it gives you a lot of different ways to look at things and a lot of flexibility. Okay, guys, so we pretty much covered everything that you need to know about the backlog. And like I said before, every time you create an issue, it'll automatically go on the backlog for you. And then based on the backlog, you can actually start creating your sprints like I showed you earlier in this part of the course. Okay, guys, we'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.